Kinesiology 223, Chapter 9, still on team dynamics and cohesion. Book presentation 6. This is going to delve a little bit more into just individual performance in team sports and how they're kind of interrelated. And we talked a little bit about that in a different presentation. Now we're kind of reinforcing what we talked about earlier. Most agree that the best individuals don't normally make the team, right? So it ends up being a situation where you might have a great athlete, but a cancerous type of informal role position as found on page 188. And as a result, you have to make a decision to not have that person play because they take away from the overall ability of that team to perform, even though they might be a great athlete. In some regards, you got to look at this and go, okay, they might not be a team player that is required with the other athletes on the field because of their cancerous nature. But then you go, well, here's this person who's a good enough athlete, has good enough skills, but really when they're on the field, they seem to bring everybody else together. When they're on the pitch and we're playing against another team in soccer, they're doing a great job of kind of communicating, commanding, controlling, working with the other athletes on the team. That might be your winner. So it ends up being a case where with Steiner's model, they try to find a way to have a way to encapsulate this into an equation. And it's kind of a challenge. It's kind of like a value of an over/under expected average. Like when you talk about different sports and you talk like, I won't get into sports betting, but you have an over or under expected value. So you're anticipating a person will have an average number of catches, an average number of yards, an average number of goals, whatever it may be. You're looking at this in terms of an equation and saying, what is my actual productivity as compared to my potential productivity? And I tend to look at it in terms of like, okay, I have as an athlete the ability to do X. That's my potential productivity. If I do better than X, in some regard, is that really theoretically possible? I'll table that for a second. Then I actually have greater actual productivity than potential. If I do less, then I have less actual productivity than potential. More often than not, what you're really trying to do here is you have this actual productivity, you have potential productivity, and you're trying to bring your actual productivity kind of like right up against that. And to say you're going to overachieve and do better than your potential is probably a bit of a misnomer. But that's really what they're after in this book, is trying to evaluate a person, perhaps evaluate a group, or evaluate an overall team in terms of what the potential productivity could be versus their actual productivity. And the drag on that process is the losses attributed to faulty group processes. Let's dig in a little bit further, right? It's the team's best possible performance, and it's based upon the abilities on the totality in the aggregate of all the athletes on the team. It's a very hypothetical concept that works under the presumption that the team is made up of the best individuals performing at their best. And I would contest this should also take into account things like team climate and coach as well. And where they're describing this equation is the actual would fall short due to faulty group processes. So you go, okay, if I'm in a situation where I am at maximal capacity or I'm operating, at full potential productivity, I just feel like I'm talking in business school, and you have a gap between those two, between what is potential and what is actual, then it becomes, what is that gap? What's causing that? And you can start to equate out what those things are, make changes in your process or in your coaching to be able to change those and change outcome. They attempt to have kind of like an if-then scenario, almost like a causal relationship. And the big takeaway to me is this, if you have two teams who are evenly matched, the one with less process loss, less mistakes, wins. And then coaching matters in the process. It really does. And you have to be able to now look at this and go, how can I manage my process loss to increase the actual performance and get my team closer and closer and closer to their potential? Nebulous, I know when I say potential ability. So faulty group processes can be attributed to like motivation loss. When you have team members who don't give 100%, they believe that somebody else is doing all the work, and so everybody else kind of becomes more slack in their efforts. Coordination losses. I know there was one student who mentioned that they played soccer and they were on a team together with another player who was a good friend of theirs. And in the context of a game, that friend of theirs was injured. And as a result, they had difficulty kind of coordinating their efforts with the new player that took their place, took the other person's place. And so you end up having this case where you become so attuned to the other person on a team that when they're injured and they're out, you now have to relearn the other person's characteristics and traits. I would say as a coach, you could probably work on introducing different players with each other in different environments to be able to work on the coordination, if you will, between those two athletes, so you don't have coordination losses in case you have person A instead of working with person B. Person A has to work with person C, right? And it's a good model. I like this. I like this in the context of kind of understanding where things can happen. But it's a very complex, process when you start talking athletics. And, when you talk about different sports like basketball, soccer, football, or basketball, football, rowing, or volleyball, they're more susceptible to coordination losses than sports requiring like track and field, because if you think of this as a coach, you're going to have to spend more time on the cohesion and teamwork within your group if you're playing a sport like soccer, basketball, or football. When you get into like a single sport like track, it becomes a little different in terms of how you're working and developing a person. It'll be more technique oriented. So the sport kind of drives the training, and the sport also, in a regard, drives what you're focusing on as a coach, whether you're focusing on the motivation side or the coordination side. So this begets the question regarding ability and timing and anticipation and performance. Are two evenly matched athletes better working together as opposed to one superstar and a partner with weaker overall skills? The book takes the stance that they found that no matter what level the individuals brought to the task, when two or more people tried to interact in precise ways, their ability to anticipate one another's movements and time their own actions was at least as important as their individual performance qualities. Meaning, when you have individuals who are bifurcated very, very separate in terms of skill and ability, those individuals had difficulty working together as a team. But the closer the skill levels you have between those two athletes, the more capable they were and able to interact and perform in very precise ways. It's interesting when you think about it, right? Because you would think you'd put like the great person with the mediocre person, but really, no, when there's cooperation and interaction, and that's necessary to the process, you have to have, two people working together to basically win a game or win a match. You want those individuals to have ability that's, close to one another. So they do a pretty good job of encapsulating this here, and I like how they do this, and I think it's worth a look for you guys to get on page 196 and check it out. And they spend some time on the Ringelmann effect, where they describe it as it's a phenomenon by which individual performance decreases as the number of people in a group increase. I think they do a really good job of summarizing the whole dang thing in the key point. They spend a lot of time elsewhere in the book going over the different subpoints. So I would maybe take a skim to that part in 198. But, think of it in terms of having a team of high performers, and they should all be carrying their weight. But that doesn't always happen. And when you're in an environment where you don't have a team of high performers, as that crevasse or separation gets bigger and bigger, you'll have less and less, if you will, cohesion viewing or going towards a particular goal. And if we go back one slide, you'll have a little bit more of a Ringelmann effect where people will start to slack because they believe that their effort doesn't matter anyways. All right, moving on.